Hi, this is Hart with the Climate Report, and we are on video number 1. Previously, I've done 131 episodes of audio on WFMP, FM Louisville, 106.5. Also, that's on SoundCloud. Go to theclimatereport.net if you would like a link to those audio episodes. So, this is video number 1, so I thought I would start with what I consider to be the 5 threats to human existence. Now, that's a heavy topic, and it might be presumptuous to think that one person can have an impact on all that, but it's not just one person, it's people working together to try to solve the very real threats that we face, as opposed to false threats. We have a system, we have a government, and a military-industrial complex and a whole corporate world that thrives on convincing us of false threats. But we're going to talk about the real threats, and there are 5 in my estimation. The 5 threats are climate change. Number 2, agribusiness, which means the way we have for delivering food to us. Number 3, biodiversity. Number 4, water. And number 5, nuclear war. So let's take those one at a time and just talk about each one of them. Number 1, climate. So on the Climate Report, we believe that climate change is real, and it's unfortunate that we're stuck in American culture, we're stuck at a stage of the conversation where we're debating whether or not it's real. It's like debating whether or not the law of gravity is real, or debating whether or not the earth is flat. You can either side with the vast majority, the overwhelming consensus of science, or you can side with oil companies. Those are your choices. So we've known for 150 years that CO2 is a greenhouse gas. We know that every time sunlight hits a CO2 molecule, it turns a little bit of it into heat. A little bit of that light gets turned into heat. We know that our climate has warmed on average globally by 1 degree Celsius. We know when the entire climate warms by 1 degree Celsius, that adds a tremendous amount of energy to the atmosphere. It also adds a tremendous amount of energy to the oceans, and the oceans have stored a lot of heat. So climate is one threat to our existence. Secondly, agribusiness is a threat to our existence, meaning what we should do is we should be getting our food on small local organic farms. Small local organic farms produce food that is more nutritious, and it produces it, by many estimates, more abundantly. Whereas agribusiness, it produces foods that, well, for one thing, we have to transport them large distances. The average bite of food takes 1,000 miles before it reaches your plate. Also, agribusiness is the way it's done, it's devastating to the environment. It's devastating to pollinators. It takes huge amounts of fossil fuel. It takes pesticides, which are neurotoxins, harmful to humans and devastating to pollinators. It takes fossil fuels. It takes fossil fuel-based fertilizers, which are, that there's no reason for us to be doing that to our soil. And the only reason we're doing that to our soil is because it suits the needs and the interests of a very tiny minority. Third, biodiversity. The loss of biodiversity is a threat to our very existence. So for example, we've lost 75% of insects in the last 40 years. Why have we lost 75% of insects in the last 40 years? Because our government and our economy and our media are run by a tiny fraction of people. That it's structured in such a way as to benefit a tiny fraction of people, irrespective of what happens to the vast majority, irrespective of what happens to the 99%. Fourth, water. Because of climate change and because of the way agribusiness uses water and because of the way mining and drilling use water and because of the way Nestle, for example, takes water from one place, puts it in a bottle, sells it to somebody else somewhere else. We have the water as a commodity. Water is something to be bought and sold, instead of water being an essential ingredient to life and therefore a natural right, which is not a commodity. But all over the world, for the reasons I mentioned, and also because climate change is causing desertification, the conversion of otherwise fertile land and otherwise forest to deserts. So climate change causes that. The way agribusiness is done, it causes that. So the way we do agribusiness, it requires too much water. There's no reason for the production of food to require so much water. So the disappearance of clean fresh water is a threat to our existence. Here in the Ohio Valley, upriver from Louisville, we have a proposed petrochemical complex that is going to be devastating to water, as it already has been. Fossil fuel drilling and coal is bad for water. The coal industry is bad for water. Fracking is a disaster. Fracking is part of the process whereby we turn fossil fuels into plastic. We need more of that, don't we? We need more fracking and more plastic. That's the reason we have a petrochemical complex going in right upriver. And that is a threat to our water, even though we don't live in an area that has a shortage of rainfall. We are threatening our water supply because of a business that benefits a very, very few people, irrespective of the needs and the interests and the health of everyone else. Number 5, nuclear war. You would have thought that this would not be a problem anymore, but the people that I respect, the sources that I respect, people like Noam Chomsky, people like Daniel Ellsberg, who's famously associated with the Pentagon Papers. Nobody knows better than Daniel Ellsberg how nuclear strategy works. And Ellsberg, among others, knowledgeable people, rational people, people with the knowledge of the facts, know that nuclear war is a greater threat to our existence than ever. It should never have been, nuclear weapons should never have been invented, even if somebody thinks they maybe should have been invented because they maybe did help us deal with a legitimate threat back in 1940s. Well, they never should have been used. If they were used once because there was a perceived need, they should have been put to bed. The only reasons the Russians ever had nuclear missiles, now I'm going to lose some of you on this because, just because that's where most Americans are, but the only reason the Russians ever had missiles to begin with was because they were defending themselves against us. So I say that at the risk of alienating some people, but we really need to rethink. We need to rethink everything. I have just named 5 threats to our existence. Each one is an imminent threat. Some more than others. Some threats are more immediate than others. But that's what we talk about on the climate report. I heard, and we need to change our political system. We need to change our economic system. And I'll leave you with this thought. Frederick Douglass, the man who freed himself from slavery and then became an abolitionist. He was a free black man before the Civil War. He said, power concedes nothing without a demand. Power doesn't give ground. People who have power don't just give up ground because they're nice. They give up ground because they have to. And they give up ground because there is a demand. And I heard a variation on that thought. Charlene Carruthers, I believe, said, power concedes nothing without a collective demand. Power concedes nothing without a collective demand. Hart-Hagen alone is nobody because just the powers that be are not going to listen to one person. But the threats that I just named, the American people, if you ask them one by one about issues, the people are on our side. The people are on the side of those who want to solve these problems and thereby create a more just and sustainable world. Thanks for joining me on the Climate Report. Go to theclimatereport.net for more information. Have a good day.